He may even identify himself with it and believe that he is what he appears to be.
Welcome to the NCE Study Guide. I created this study guide using ChatGPT and Notebook LM. So think of these modules as AI-powered audio flashcards. Each one of these 20 modules contains 10 mock questions representing the kind of questions that you might encounter on the National Counseling exam. I created this primarily for myself, and I decided to make these available to anyone else who might benefit from this kind of study aid. But please note, while I have done my best to ensure that these modules align with NCE content, I encourage you to cross-reference them with trusted study guides and resources for the most accurate preparation. These modules are not affiliated with or endorsed by the NBCC or any official licensing board. So, with no further ado, here are your AI study buddies from Notebook LM. Enjoy!
All right, ready to dive in. Module 4 of your NCE prep is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, this one is all about those big counseling theories you've got to know, backward and forwards.
Like family systems, Freud, ethics, even a little bit of multiculturalism, right?
Exactly. This module was actually created with AI using Notebook LM. So it's like having a super smart study buddy.
Okay, so let's get right into it with question 31.
Sounds good.
This one's straight out of Bowen's family systems theory.
Well,
Which, let's be real, can be a little tough to grasp sometimes. The question says, in Bowman's family systems theory, what concept refers to the ability to separate one's thoughts and feelings from those of their family?
okay, I see where this is going.
Your choices are A, triangulation, B, differentiation of self, C, emotional cutoff, and D, fusion.
All right, let's take a look. Triangulation. You know, like when a kid gets dragged into their parents' arguments and ends up being the go-between?
Oh, yeah.
That's classic triangulation, bringing in a third person to try to ease the tension.
Right, but doesn't that usually just make things messier?
Absolutely. And then you've got differentiation of self. That's all about healthy boundaries. You can be close to your family, love them, all that good stuff, but you don't let their emotions control you.
So it's like being your own person, even within a family unit.
Exactly. Think of a client who can't make a simple decision without calling their mom for approval. That might be a sign of low differentiation.
Ooh, interesting. Okay, what about emotional cutoff? That sounds pretty drastic.
It is. It's like cutting ties with your family to avoid all those, difficult feelings. It might seem like a solution in the short term, but it can really cause problems down the line.
So it's more like avoiding the problem than actually solving it.
Exactly. And finally, we have fusion. That's almost the opposite of differentiation.
Okay, so that's like being totally enmeshed with your family.
Yes, where there's very little sense of individuality. It can lead to all sorts of issues with decision-making and relationships.
Right, like you're all kind of blended together, no clear boundary.
So,
All right, so the question again is, in Bowen's family systems theory, what concept refers to the ability to separate one's thoughts and feelings from those of their family?
the answer is B, differentiation of self. Bowen believed this was super important for both healthy families and for people to thrive as individuals.
Got it. So it's not about becoming completely independent from your family, but about having that ability to step back and think for yourself.
Exactly.
Awesome. Now let's move on to question 32. This one is all about reality therapy, which always feels so empowering to me.
Oh, yeah. Reality therapy is great.
The question asks, which of the following is a major goal of reality therapy?
Okay, let's hear the options.
You've got A, exploring the unconscious mind. B, establishing emotional awareness. C, meeting basic psychological needs. And D, challenging irrational beliefs.
Okay, so exploring the unconscious mind, that's more Freudian territory, right?
Yeah, like digging into those deep-seated childhood issues. Reality therapy is way more focused on the here and now.
Precisely. It's less about understanding the why of your problems and more about figuring out what to do about them right now.
So it's very action-oriented.
Very much so.
Okay, what about establishing emotional awareness? Isn't that important in any therapy?
It is, but it's not the primary focus in reality therapy. This approach is more about understanding how your actions and choices are impacting your life, not just about feeling your feelings.
I see. So it's about taking responsibility and making changes.
Right.
Okay, what about meeting basic psychological needs? That seems pretty fundamental.
It is. Reality therapy is based on the idea that we all have these basic psychological needs: love, belonging, power, freedom, and fun. And when those needs aren't met, that's when problems arise.
It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but with a therapy twist.
You could say that. The goal of reality therapy is to help clients identify those unmet needs and find healthy ways to fulfill them.
That makes so much sense.
And finally, we have challenging irrational beliefs. That's more of a cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT thing.
Yeah, CBT is all about identifying and changing those negative thought patterns.
Exactly. While reality therapy might touch on thoughts and beliefs, it's primarily focused on behavior and choices.
Okay, so just to be clear, the question is, which of the following is a major goal of reality therapy?
The answer is C, meeting basic psychological needs. The whole premise of reality therapy is that by addressing those core needs, we can empower clients to live more fulfilling lives.
It's about giving people the tools to create their own happiness. I love that.
Absolutely.
Okay, question 33 is a bit of an ethics doozy. It asks, what is the primary focus of the ACA Code of Ethics regarding dual relationships?
Dual relationships.
It's one of those topics that can make even the most seasoned counselors a little nervous.
For sure.
Here are your options. A, they must be avoided at all costs. B, they are prohibited if they involve monetary exchange. C, they are acceptable if they do not harm the client. D, they are only allowed in rural areas.
Okay, so option A, avoiding dual relationships at all costs. Well, that's the ideal. But the ACA code recognizes that it's not always possible, especially in smaller communities or specialized fields.
Right, like sometimes you might run into a client at the grocery store or something.
Exactly. And then option B is about monetary exchange. The code goes way beyond just financial transactions, though. It considers any relationship that could potentially exploit or harm the client.
So it's about protecting the client on all levels, emotionally, financially, everything.
Right. And then C, they are acceptable if they do not harm the client. That's really the crux of it. The ACA code emphasizes putting the client's well-being first and foremost.
It's about recognizing that not all dual relationships are inherently bad, but the counselor has to be super careful and make sure the client's interests are always protected.
You got it.
Okay, and option D, about dual relationships only being allowed in rural areas. That's just not true.
Nope. Ethical considerations are the same no matter where you practice.
So the question is, what is the primary focus of the ACA Code of Ethics regarding dual relationships?
The answer is C. They are acceptable if they do not harm the client. It really highlights the importance of careful judgment and always putting the client's well-being above all else.
It's a reminder that ethics isn't just a set of rules, it's a way of thinking.
Absolutely.
All right, question 34. This one's all about group therapy. You know, the kind of stuff that can make some people break out in a cold sweat just thinking about it.
Yeah, but it can also be incredibly powerful.
Absolutely. The question is, which stage of group therapy typically involves the development of trust and cohesion?
Ooh, this is a classic one.
Here are your choices. A, forming. B, storming. C, norming. D, performing.
Think of it like the stages of a relationship, but with multiple people involved. You know, forming is that initial awkward phase where everyone is kind of figuring each other out, like the first day of class.
Yeah, everyone's sizing each other up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then you have storming, which is where those conflicts and power struggles tend to come out.
Oh, yeah, like when people start to feel comfortable enough to disagree and things can get a bit heated.
Precisely. But that's actually a healthy process because it allows the group to move toward norming.
Which is where the trust and cohesion really start to develop.
Exactly. The group starts to feel like a team. And then finally you have performing, where the group is really working together towards shared goals.
So like when everything clicks and the group is firing on all cylinders.
Exactly.
So the question was, which stage of group therapy typically involves the development of trust and cohesion?
The answer is C, norming. That's where the group really starts to gel.
It's like they've weathered the storm and come out stronger on the other side. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it really is.
Okay, ready for question 35. This one brings us back to good old Freud. You know, the guy who had a lot to say about the unconscious mind.
Ah, Freud. Always a fascinating deep dive.
The question asks, according to Freud, which component of personality operates on the pleasure principle?
Interesting. So we're talking about the part of us that wants what it wants when it wants it.
Exactly, like instant gratification no matter what.
Gotcha.
Your choices are A, ID, B, ego, C, superego, and D, conscience.
Okay, let's see. So the I'd, that's like the primal instinctual part of us, right?
Yeah, the part that just wants to eat cake and take naps.
Exactly. The I'd is all about seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, no regard for consequences.
It's like that little devil on your shoulder whispering, go ahead, do the fun thing.
Yeah, exactly. Then you've got the ego, which is a bit more grounded in reality.
The ego is trying to keep us from completely imploding.
Pretty much. The ego tries to balance the id's demands with the constraints of the real world.
Okay, so the ego is the voice of reason. What about the superego?
The superego is all about morals and values. It's that little angel on your shoulder saying things like, be good and follow the rules.
Right, it's like the internalized voice of our parents and society.
Exactly. And then there's the conscience, which is sort of like a part of the superego, but it's specifically focused on knowing right from wrong.
Okay, so the superego is the whole moral compass, and the conscience is that little needle pointing towards what we should be doing.
A perfect analogy.
So back to the question. According to Freud, which component of personality operates on the pleasure principle?
That would be A, the idea. It's that primal force that's all about immediate gratification.
Makes sense. It's like the id is the party animal, the ego is the designated driver, and the superego is the one cleaning up the mess the next morning.
I love that analogy. So true.
Okay, on to question 36. This one shifts gears a bit and asks, which theory suggests that individuals develop through observing and imitating others?
This is a big one. It's all about how we learn and grow, not just as kids, but throughout our lives.
Yeah, I'm sensing a good analogy coming on here too.
Maybe. First, your choices are A, cognitive behavioral theory, B, social learning theory, C, psychodynamic theory, and D, trait factor theory.
Okay, so cognitive behavioral theory, or CBT, is all about how our thoughts influence our feelings and behaviors, right?
Yes, CBT focuses on those negative thought patterns and how they can lead to unhealthy behaviors. It acknowledges that we learn from experience, but it's more about changing those internal dialogues than copying others.
So it's less about who we're watching and more about what's going on in our own heads. What about social learning theory? That sounds like it might fit the question pretty well.
It does. Think about how babies learn. They watch their parents, they mimic facial expressions, and they imitate sounds.
It's like monkey see, monkey do, but with way more complex brain stuff going on underneath.
Exactly. And Albert Bandura, who is like the rock star of social learning theory, showed that we don't just blindly copy. We process information, we make choices, we develop our own unique way of doing things.
So it's like nature and nurture working together.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, what about psychodynamic theory? That's Freud's territory again, right?
Right. Psychodynamic theory is all about those unconscious conflicts in early childhood experiences. While it acknowledges the role of learning, it's more focused on those deeper, hidden motivations.
So it's less about who we're watching and more about what's going on inside. What about trait factor theory? That one sounds kind of like a personality test.
It is. Trait factor theory is about identifying stable personality traits that predict behavior, like are you introverted or extroverted? While it might consider the environment, its main focus is not on observing and imitating others.
Okay, so the question was, which theory suggests that individuals develop through observing and imitating others?
The answer is B, social learning theory.
It's a good reminder that we're constantly learning from the people around us.
Yes, we are, sometimes without even realizing it.
Which makes me think about the responsibility we all have as role models, right? What we do and say can really have an impact.
Absolutely, we're all interconnected in that way.
Okay, let's move on to question 37. This one dives into the world of public health, which is super important for counselors, especially those working in community settings.
Public health is essential.
The question asks, which term describes an intervention designed to prevent the onset of a disorder?
Okay, so we're talking about stopping a problem before it even starts.
Exactly. Here are your choices. A, primary prevention, B, secondary prevention, C, tertiary prevention, and D, crisis intervention.
All right, let's unpack these. Think of it like trying to prevent someone from falling into a pit.
Interesting analogy. Okay, I'm listening.
Primary prevention would be like building a fence around the pit so no one can even get close to the edge.
So it's about proactive measures to address the root causes of a problem.
Exactly. Things like promoting mental health awareness, teaching coping skills, or creating supportive environments.
Okay, I'm with you. What about secondary prevention? Is that like catching people as they're starting to slip?
It's more like having a net at the bottom of the pit to catch anyone who falls. So secondary prevention is about early detection and intervention.
Ah, okay. So things like screening for depression or anxiety.
Exactly. You're trying to identify those warning signs and intervene early on.
Got it. What about tertiary prevention? Is that like helping people climb out of the pit after they've already fallen in?
You got it. Tertiary prevention is about minimizing the long-term impact of a disorder that's already taken hold. Things like rehabilitation programs or support groups.
So it's about helping people recover and prevent further complications.
Exactly. And then you've got crisis intervention, which is more like calling an ambulance when someone falls into the pit. It's about responding to an acute situation and preventing immediate harm.
Right, so that's very much a reactive approach. Okay, so the question was, which term describes an intervention designed to prevent the onset of a disorder?
The answer is A, primary prevention. It's about taking steps to stop the problem before it even begins.
It's like that saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Exactly.
Okay, question 38 takes us into the world of solution-focused brief therapy, or SFBT.
Ah, SFBT. Love it.
It's all about finding solutions and focusing on what's working, right?
Right. It's a very empowering and optimistic approach.
The question asks, what is the primary focus of solution-focused brief therapy, SFBT?
Good question.
Your choices are A, identifying and resolving past traumas, B, building on client strengths and finding solutions, C, exploring unconscious conflicts, and D, changing dysfunctional thought patterns.
All right. So option A, identifying and resolving past traumas, is more in line with approaches like psychodynamic therapy or trauma-informed care.
Yeah, those therapies are more about delving into the past.
Right. SFBT recognizes that the past can influence the present, but it doesn't dwell on it. It's much more forward-focused.
So it's less about how did we get here and more about where do we go from here.
Exactly. And option B, building on client strengths and finding solutions, that's pretty much the SFBT motto.
It's about recognizing that even when people are struggling, they still have strengths and resources they can draw upon.
Exactly. And then option C, exploring unconscious conflicts, that's more Freudian.
Yeah, Freud was all about those hidden motivations and desires.
Right. SFBT is much more pragmatic and focused on conscious goals and actions.
So it's more about taking action in the present to create change.
Yes. And option D, changing dysfunctional thought patterns, that's more of a CBT thing.
Right. CBT is all about challenging those negative thoughts.
Exactly. While SFDT can indirectly influence thoughts by shifting the focus, it doesn't target them directly like CBT does.
So it's less about battling those inner demons and more about finding ways to work around them.
You could say that.
Okay, so the question was, what is the primary focus of solution-focused brief therapy, SFBT?
The answer is B, building on client strengths and finding solutions.
I love that. It's such a hopeful and empowering approach.
It is.
Okay, question 39 is a little different. It's about asking the right questions, which is obviously crucial for any good counselor.
Oh, yeah. Asking the right questions can make all the difference.
Absolutely. The question asks, which of the following is an example of an open-ended question?
Okay. Open-ended questions are those that encourage clients to elaborate, share their feelings. You want to avoid those yes or no questions.
Right. We want to open up the conversation, not shut it down.
Exactly.
Here are the options. A, do you enjoy your job? B, how do you feel about your current situation? C, are you satisfied with your progress? D, did you follow through on your goals?
Some of these are definitely better than others.
Okay, let's pretend I'm the client and you ask me option A, do you enjoy your job?
All right, game on. So do you enjoy your job?
Nope.
And just like that, the conversation hits a wall.
Because I gave you a one-word answer and there's nowhere else to go?
Precisely. Now let me try option B. How do you feel about your current situation?
Okay, go for it.
How do you feel about your current situation?
Well, it's complicated. My job is stressing me out. My relationship isn't great. I'm not sleeping well. I just feel kind of lost.
See, now we're getting somewhere.
That open-ended question gave me the space to actually express myself.
Exactly.
And option C and D, are you satisfied with your progress? And did you follow through on your goals? Those also seem like they'd lead to those yes or no dead ends.
They do. They're closed-ended questions. While they can be useful sometimes, they don't create the same kind of space for exploration.
Okay, so to recap, the question is, which of the following is an example of an open-ended question?
The answer is B, how do you feel about your current situation? It's a simple question, but it can really open up the conversation.
It's a great reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do as counselors is just listen.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, last question in Module 4, number 40. This one's about multicultural counseling, which is super important in today's world.
Absolutely. It's a must-have for any counselor.
The question asks, in multicultural counseling, what does cultural encapsulation refer to?
Cultural encapsulation is basically like having blinders on when it comes to cultural differences. It can really hinder a counselor's effectiveness.
Yikes, okay. Give me the options. I want to learn how to avoid those blinders.
You got it. Here they are. A. Developing cultural competence. B. Rejecting cultural differences in favor of a universal perspective. C. Emphasizing the client's cultural identity. And D. Merging two distinct cultural practices.
So option A, developing cultural competence. That's a good thing, right?
It is. Cultural competence is all about actively seeking knowledge and skills to work effectively with clients from diverse backgrounds.
So it's about being open to learning and understanding different perspectives.
Yeah.
The opposite of being encapsulated.
Exactly. And option B, rejecting cultural differences in favor of a universal perspective. That's pretty much the definition of cultural encapsulation.
So it's like saying, we're all basically the same, so your culture doesn't really matter.
Yeah, which is not only insensitive, but also completely ineffective.
Right. It's like trying to fit everyone into the same mold, ignoring the richness of human diversity.
Exactly. And option C, emphasizing the client's cultural identity. That's important, but it's not the same as cultural encapsulation. It's about understanding the client's cultural context without assuming it dictates their entire experience.
So it's about seeing the whole person, not just their cultural background.
Precisely. And option D, merging two distinct cultural practices, while it might describe certain cultural phenomena, isn't really relevant to cultural encapsulation.
Okay, so to recap, the question was, in multicultural counseling, what does cultural encapsulation refer to?
The answer is B, rejecting cultural differences in favor of a universal perspective.
It's a reminder that we always need to be aware of our own biases and assumptions
Absolutely.
and approach each client with respect for their unique cultural background.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Wow, that was a lot. 10 questions down, and I feel like we've covered some serious ground.
We did. This module was jam-packed.
But it's the kind of stuff that's really going to make a difference in our practice, not just for passing the NCE, but for being better counselors.
I agree. It's all about becoming more competent and ethical practitioners.
Right. But here's a thought to ponder as you move on to the next module. We've seen how all these different theories can connect and overlap.
Right. There are a lot of common threads.
But where might they clash?
Oh, good question.
Like, what happens when two different theoretical perspectives are pulling you in opposite directions in a real counseling situation? How do you decide which approach to use?
That's a great point.
It's going to happen, right? In real life, things aren't always so neat and tidy.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what makes counseling both challenging and rewarding.
It's about being able to think critically, to weigh different perspectives, to make the best decision in the moment.
Couldn't agree more.
So keep those thought gears turning as you dive into the next module.
And we'll see you back here for another deep dive soon.
See ya.
Yeah, it can be tough figuring out which theory to use sometimes.
Totally. Okay, so question 36 is asking about how we learn from other people. It says, which theory suggests that individuals develop through observing and imitating others?
Okay, interesting. Let's see what we've got.
Your choices are A, cognitive behavioral theory, B, social learning theory, C, psychodynamic theory, and D, trait factor theory.
All right, I think I know where this is going. So, cognitive behavioral theory, CBT, that's all about how our thoughts influence our feelings and actions, right?
Yeah, CBT is really good for helping people change those negative thought patterns.
Exactly. It acknowledges that we learn from experience, but it's more about changing those internal conversations than just copying other people.
So it's more about what's happening inside our heads than what we're observing externally.
Right. Now, social learning theory. I bet you can already guess where this one's going.
I think so. Social learning is all about watching and imitating, right?
Yep. Think about how little kids learn. They watch their parents, siblings, caregivers. They try to copy everything.
It's like that classic monkey see, monkey do, but way more complex.
Exactly. Albert Bandura, the guy who really developed social learning theory, showed that we don't just copy blindly.
Right, we make choices about who and what to imitate.
Exactly. We process information, we learn, and we develop our own unique style.
Okay, what about psychodynamic theory? That's Freud again, right?
Yep. All about those unconscious drives and early childhood experiences.
So it's more about what's going on inside, not so much about observing others.
Right. While it recognizes that we learn from others, its focus is on those deeper motivations that shape who we are.
Okay, and then there's trait factor theory. That one sounds kind of like a personality quiz.
It does, doesn't it? It's about identifying those stable personality traits that shape our behavior. Things like extroversion, conscientiousness, all those things.
So it's about figuring out our personality type and how it influences our actions.
Exactly. And while it might consider how our environment affects these traits, it's not focused on observing and imitating others.
Okay, so the question was, which theory suggests that individuals develop through observing and imitating others?
The answer is B, social learning theory.
It's a good reminder that we all have a responsibility to be good role models, right? Because you never know who's watching and learning from you.
Oh, absolutely. Our actions can have a ripple effect.
Okay, question 37 is a public health question. It asks, which term describes an intervention designed to prevent the onset of a disorder?
So stopping a problem before it even starts. I like it.
Me too. Here are the options.
Yeah.
A, primary prevention. B, secondary prevention. C, tertiary prevention. And D, crisis intervention.
Okay, I love thinking about this in terms of levels, like layers of protection.
Okay, so how would you describe primary prevention?
Well, imagine you're trying to stop people from falling into a hole. Primary prevention would be like building a fence around that hole so no one can even get close to it.
So it's about addressing those root causes and stopping the problem before it even has a chance to develop.
Exactly. Things like public health campaigns to raise awareness about mental health issues or teaching kids coping skills to build resilience.
It's like proactive problem solving.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay, what about secondary prevention?
Secondary prevention is more like having a safety net at the bottom of that hole, just in case someone falls in.
I see. So it's about early detection and intervention.
Exactly. Things like mental health screenings in schools or early intervention programs for kids showing signs of developmental delays.
Got it. So you're trying to catch the problem in those early stages.
Right, before it becomes more serious and harder to treat.
What about tertiary prevention?
Tertiary prevention is more about helping people after they've already fallen into the hole, like providing them with a ladder to climb out or offering rehabilitation services.
So it's about damage control, in a way.
Yeah. You're trying to minimize the long-term impact of the disorder, prevent further complications, and support people in their recovery.
That makes sense. And then we have crisis intervention. Where does that fit in?
Crisis intervention is like calling 911 when someone falls into the hole. It's immediate and focused on stabilizing the situation and preventing further harm.
So it's a very reactive approach, dealing with the problem in that acute moment.
Right.
Okay, so the question was, which term describes an intervention designed to prevent the onset of a disorder?
The answer is A, primary prevention. It's about taking steps to stop the problem before it even starts.
I love the image of that fence. It's so powerful.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that prevention is key.
All right, question 38 is all about solution-focused brief therapy, or SFBT.
SFBT is great.
I love how it focuses on solutions, not problems.
It's all about empowering clients to create the change they want to see.
The question asks, what is the primary focus of solution-focused brief therapy, SFBT?
I think this one is pretty straightforward.
Let's see. Your choices are A, identifying and resolving past traumas. B, building on client strengths and finding solutions. C, exploring unconscious conflicts. And D, changing dysfunctional thought patterns.
Okay, so option A, identifying and resolving past traumas. That's more in line with psychodynamic therapy or trauma-informed approaches. SFBT is much more future-oriented.
So it's not about digging into the past and figuring out why things went wrong. It's more about figuring out where we want to go from here.
Exactly. And option B, building on client strength and finding solutions. That's pretty much the essence of SFBT.
It's about recognizing that even when people are struggling, they still have inner strengths and resources that we can tap into.
Yep. It's all about finding those glimmers of hope and building on them.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, option C, exploring unconscious conflicts. That sounds like something Freud would be interested in.
It does, doesn't it? SFBT is a lot more practical and focused on conscious goals and actions.
So it's less about those deep-seated issues and more about creating actionable steps toward a desired future.
Right. And then option D, changing dysfunctional thought patterns. That's more of a CBT thing.
CBT is amazing at helping people challenge and change those negative thoughts.
It really is. While SFDT can indirectly influence thoughts by focusing on solutions, it doesn't target them directly the way CBT does.
So it's less about battling those negative thoughts head on and more about finding ways to create positive change in the here and now.
Exactly.
Okay, so just to be clear, the question was, what is the primary focus of solution-focused brief therapy, SFBT?
The answer is B, building on client strengths and finding solutions.
It's a really empowering approach.
I think so too. It gives clients a sense of agency and hope.
All right, question 39 is about a really important counseling skill, asking the right questions. It asks, which of the following is an example of an open-ended question?
Ooh, open-ended questions. Those are gold.
They really are. They allow the client to tell their story in their own words, and they give us so much more information to work with.
Exactly. You want to avoid those yes or no questions that can shut down the conversation.
Right, we want to keep it flowing.
Okay, let's see the options.
Here they are. A, do you enjoy your job? B, how do you feel about your current situation? C, are you satisfied with your progress? D, did you follow through on your goals?
All right, so option A, do you enjoy your job? That's a closed-ended question.
Yeah, you really only answer that with a yes or no.
Right, which can be fine sometimes, but it's not going to get you very far in a therapy session.
Exactly. What about option B? How do you feel about your current situation?
Now, that's an open-ended question.
It invites the client to share their thoughts and feelings in more detail.
It also gives them the space to explore different aspects of their situation and to maybe even uncover things they weren't aware of before.
It's amazing how much information can come out when you ask the right question.
It really is.
Yeah.
And then option C, are you satisfied with your progress? And D, did you follow through on your goals? Those are also closed-ended questions.
We're more about getting a specific answer rather than encouraging the client to open up and explore.
Right.
So the question was, which of the following is an example of an open-ended question?
The answer is B, how do you feel about your current situation?
It's a simple question that can really make a big difference.
It can change the whole direction of a session.
All right, last question for this module. Question 40 asks about multicultural counseling. It says, in multicultural counseling, what does cultural encapsulation refer to?
Cultural encapsulation, it's something every counselor needs to be aware of.
It's like being stuck in your own cultural bubble.
Exactly. It can make it really difficult to connect with and understand clients from different backgrounds.
And it can lead to all sorts of biases and assumptions, right?
For sure.
Okay, so here are your choices. A, developing cultural competence. B, rejecting cultural differences in favor of a universal perspective. C, emphasizing the client's cultural identity. And D, merging two distinct cultural practices.
So option A, developing cultural competence, that's the opposite of cultural encapsulation.
Right. Cultural competence is all about being aware of and sensitive to different cultures.
It's about actively seeking knowledge and skills to work effectively with clients from all walks of life.
It's about being a lifelong learner, really.
Absolutely. And then option B, rejecting cultural differences in favor of a universal perspective. That's cultural encapsulation in a nutshell.
So it's like saying, we're all the same, so let's just ignore those pesky cultural differences.
Right, and that can be really harmful because it invalidates the client's experiences and can lead to all sorts of misunderstandings.
It's like trying to force everyone to fit into the same box when in reality, we're all unique and come from different backgrounds.
Exactly. Now, option C, emphasizing the client's cultural identity, is important, but it's not the same as cultural encapsulation.
Okay, so it's about understanding and respecting the client's cultural background, but not assuming it defines everything about them.
Right. It's about seeing the whole person. And then option D, merging two distinct cultural practices. While interesting, it's not really relevant to the concept of cultural encapsulation.
Okay, so to be clear, the question was, in multicultural counseling, what does cultural encapsulation refer to?
The answer is B, rejecting cultural differences in favor of a universal perspective.
It's a reminder that we always need to be aware of our own biases and to approach each client with an open mind and a willingness to learn.
Couldn't agree more.
That's like we always say, right? Every client is unique. You can't just assume, someone's experience based on their culture or background or anything else.
Exactly. We all come from different places and have different stories.
So true. Well, I think that wraps up Module 4. 10 questions down, a whole lot more to go.
We're making good progress.
But I feel like we've covered some really important ground today. This is going to stick with me.
Me too. This is the stuff that makes you a better counselor.
Right. It's not just about passing a test. It's about actually understanding these concepts and knowing how to apply them in real life.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm already thinking about how I'm going to use some of these techniques in my practice. Like next time I have a client who is really struggling with their family dynamics, I'm going to channel my inner Bowen and think, differentiation. Got to focus on differentiation.
That's the spirit. And if I have a client who's stuck in those negative thought patterns, maybe a little dose of reality therapy will help them focus on what they can control.
Yeah, it's like we have a whole new toolkit now.
We do. All these different lenses to look through.
But what's really cool is seeing how these different theories, even though they might come from totally different perspectives, can actually complement each other.
That's so true. They're not mutually exclusive.
Like, take the idea of differentiation self from Bowen's family systems theory. That aligns perfectly with the focus on personal responsibility in reality therapy.
Right. Both emphasize the importance of having a strong sense of self and making choices that are aligned with your values.
And even though solution-focused brief therapy might seem completely different from psychodynamic therapy, they both recognize the client's inner strengths and resources.
Yes. It's like, regardless of the approach, we're ultimately tapping into that human capacity for growth and healing, which is amazing.
It really is.
Yeah.
And of course, no matter what theoretical approach we're drawn to, those ethical considerations we talked about are always going to be super important.
The ACA Code of Ethics should be like our guiding star.
Always. Okay, but here's something I've been thinking about as we've been talking about all these different theories.
What's that?
We talked about how they can connect and overlap, but where might they clash? What happens when two theoretical perspectives are pulling you in opposite directions?
Ooh, that's a good question. It's something you'll definitely encounter in your practice.
Because in real life, it's not always so clear-cut, right?
Absolutely not. And that's what makes counseling both challenging and rewarding.
It's about being able to think critically and make the best decision for your client in that moment.
And sometimes the best decision isn't about finding the right answer. It's about holding space for the complexity and the uncertainty.
So well said. We'll keep those thought gears turning as you move on to Module 5.
And we'll be back here soon for another deep dive.
Until then, happy studying. You got this.
You do.
1, 2, 3.
Nice to be in orbit.